This is HOA Violation Vault. And the timeline is absurd. I found Karen yelling at my Ring camera, and she screamed that recording her was illegal, and she was adding harassment to my violation file. Your car is the problem, and it is getting removed. Catherine Perez stood on my doorstep at 6:45 in the morning, her breath fogging in the freezing air, her key ring jangling like a warning bell every time she gestured. I work as a telecom project coordinator, which means I live in spreadsheets and logs, and I was already running late because the overnight snow made the driveway a skating rink. She shoved a red-stamped final notice envelope at me, the same kind that had been arriving after every snowfall for the past month. I took it without opening it. She said the Timberline Winter Compliance Association had documented 12 separate violations in 3 weeks, and my guest parking abuse was now a tow-on-site situation. I asked her what guest parking abuse she was talking about. She said my car was parked in a guest spot overnight during a snow emergency, and that was an automatic fine plus towing authorization. I told her my car was in my assigned spot and had been there since I got home from work. She said the photographic evidence says otherwise, and the rules do not care about your excuses, and neither do I. Catherine worked as the fines and enforcement coordinator for the HOA, a position she took very seriously and brought up in every conversation. She had been targeting me since the first snow emergency in November. Salt Lake City had been hit hard that winter, and the Timberline Winter Compliance Association had decided that winter enforcement was their chance to show the neighborhood who was in charge. The HOA used vendors as muscle and pretended it was policy, which meant every snow event came with new rules, new fees, and new threats. Catherine loved to brag about collections, and I had become her favorite project. She said she could make this a lean conversation in one email. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm. I asked her to show me the photo. She said the evidence was in the violation file, and I could request access through the portal after I paid the outstanding balance. I asked her what outstanding balance. She rattled off a list: $50 for overnight guest spot use, $75 for failure to clear ice within 12 hours of a snow event, $50 for snow pile encroachment, and $125 for repeat offender status. $300. I told her I had not committed any of those violations, and I had been paying every fee on time through the portal. She said the portal shows I am delinquent, and the late fees are adding up daily. I was paying for a family medical expense, and every bogus fee hurt. My younger brother had been in the hospital in November, and I had been covering part of his bills while he was out of work. Catherine did not know that, and would not have cared if she did. The rules do not care about your excuses, and neither do I. She said it again, slower this time, like she was talking to a child. I gave her a small thank you, because she just handed me leverage. I did not say that out loud. I just nodded and said I would look into it. She said looking into it was not the same as compliance, and my deadline was 5 p.m. today or the tow vendor gets authorization. Then she turned and walked back to her car, keys jingling the whole way. I went inside and opened the portal on my phone. The account showed $300 in violations, all dated within the past 2 weeks, and a note that said payment attempts had been refused due to incomplete dispute resolution. I scrolled back through my email and found the payment confirmations proving I was never delinquent despite their winter fee blast. Every fee had been paid within 48 hours. Every confirmation had a transaction ID and a timestamp. I screenshot every single one and saved them to a new folder. Then I looked at the violation entries. One of them had a last edited timestamp from yesterday. I clicked into the details and saw that the original entry said the car was a silver sedan, and the updated entry said the car was a dark blue hatchback, which was mine. Someone had edited the violation entry after I disputed it. I took another screenshot. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Catherine's clipboard army shows up next. I called the management company and got transferred 3 times before someone told me dispute packets had to be submitted in writing and mailed to the office. I asked if I could email it. They said no. I asked if I could drop it off in person. They said the office was closed for walk-ins during winter months. I said that was insane. They said it was policy. I printed out my payment confirmations, wrote a 2-page letter explaining the situation, included screenshots of the edited portal entry, and mailed it certified with a tracking number. Then I sent a courtesy email to the management company with copies attached. I got an auto reply saying my email had been received, and someone would respond within 7 business days. It was Tuesday. That meant the earliest response would be the following Wednesday, assuming they did not lose it. Catherine had given me a deadline of 5 p.m. today. I left for work at 7:30. The driveway was still a mess. I had shoveled the night before, but another 2 inches had fallen overnight, and the plow had shoved a frozen ridge across the end of the driveway. I grabbed the shovel and cleared the ridge, then scattered salt across the apron. My neighbor Paul was out doing the same thing. He worked from home and had been part of the HOA longer than anyone else on the block. He was also the only board member who had ever pushed back on Catherine. He waved and walked over. He said he heard Catherine was targeting me. I asked him how he knew. He said Catherine had sent an email to the board last week asking for expedited lien approval, and Paul had been the only vote against it. He said the email included a ledger with mystery line items and no supporting documentation. I asked him if he still had the email. He said he did, and he would forward it to me. He said the management company was covering for Catherine because she brought in more fee revenue than anyone else, and they got a percentage. I thanked him and told him about the edited portal entry. He shook his head and said that was a new low even for her. I got to work 20 minutes late because the snow made me slower. My boss did not care, but I hated being off schedule. I spent the morning running reports and checking fiber deployment logs, but I kept thinking about Catherine and that edited portal entry. At lunch, I checked my email and saw that Paul had forwarded the lien request. The ledger listed my address and included $450 in violations, $150 more than Catherine had told me this morning. The line items were vague: winter non-compliance, repeat offender surcharge, administrative processing, emergency tow authorization. No dates, no specifics, no photos, just numbers. Paul had replied to the board saying the ledger did not meet the standards in the governing documents and he was voting no. Catherine had replied within 10 minutes saying Paul was obstructing compliance and she would escalate to the management company. The management company had replied saying they supported Catherine's enforcement actions, and the board should approve the lien to protect the association's financial interests. I forwarded the whole thread to my personal email and added it to my evidence folder. Then I called a lawyer. I had been putting it off because lawyers cost money and I was already stretched thin, but this was getting out of hand. The lawyer I reached specialized in HOA disputes. I explained the situation. He said the edited portal entry was huge, and the refusal to accept payments was a classic bad faith tactic. He said I should file a formal complaint with the state regulatory board and request a full accounting under Utah's HOA transparency laws. He said if the HOA had been refusing payments and then charging late fees for the refusal, that was potentially fraud. He said he could take the case, but his retainer was $1,500. I told him I would think about it. He said if I wanted to do some of the legwork myself, I should request copies of all violation records, all board meeting minutes from the past 6 months, and all correspondence between the board and the management company. He said Utah law required the HOA to produce those records within 10 business days of a written request. I thanked him and hung up. I drafted the records request during my afternoon break and sent it certified mail to both the HOA and the management company. I kept a copy for myself. Then I went back to the portal and downloaded every document I could access. Payment history, violation notices, rule amendments, snow emergency declarations. I saved everything. By the time I got home, it was almost 6 and the light was gone. There was a new red stamped final notice envelope in my mailbox. I opened it. The notice said my dispute packet had been received and rejected due to insufficient evidence, and my account was now in collections. The effective date was today. The notice was signed by Catherine. I felt my hands start shaking. I had mailed the dispute packet yesterday, and the tracking showed it had been delivered this morning. There was no way anyone had reviewed it in 8 hours, let alone rejected it. I took a photo of the notice and added it to the folder. That night I got an email from the management company saying my dispute packet had not been received and I needed to resubmit. I replied with the tracking number and delivery confirmation. They replied saying their records showed no such delivery and I should contact the postal service. I called the post office. The clerk confirmed delivery to the management company address at 10:23 a.m. I asked for a printed receipt. She said she could email it. I gave her my email and she sent it within 5 minutes. I forwarded it to the management company with a subject line that said, "Delivery confirmed, please update your records." They did not reply. The next morning, Catherine showed up at 7 a.m. with 2 people in reflective vests and clipboards. It was a snow compliance squad scene where Karen arrives with 2 volunteers in reflective vests and clipboards, and they fall apart under basic questions. They knocked on my door. I opened it and immediately started recording on my phone. Catherine said recording without consent was illegal, and she was adding harassment to my file. I told her Utah is a one-party consent state, and I am the one party. She ignored that and said the compliance squad was conducting a neighborhood audit, and my property had multiple deficiencies. One of the volunteers, a younger guy with a patchy beard, started reading from his clipboard. He said my snow pile was encroaching on the sidewalk easement. I asked him to show me. He pointed at a small mound of snow at the edge of my driveway, about 6 inches onto the grass strip between the sidewalk and the curb. I asked him if he had measured it. He looked at Catherine. She said measurements were not required for obvious violations. I asked her what the rule said. She said the rule said snow piles cannot obstruct pedestrian access or create safety hazards. I pointed out that the grass strip was not the sidewalk, and no pedestrian had ever walked there. She said the grass strip was part of the easement, and the rule applied. I asked to see the rule in writing. She said I could look it up in the portal. I said I had looked it up, and the rule said nothing about grass strips. She said her interpretation was binding unless I wanted to appeal to the board, which would cost me a $200 appeal fee. The second volunteer, a woman in her 50s with a tight bun, said my driveway had visible ice patches, and that was a slip hazard violation. I asked her if she had slipped. She said that was not the point. I asked her what the point was. She said the point was compliance. I asked her if she had inspected every other driveway on the block. She looked at Catherine again. Catherine said the squad was conducting targeted inspections based on prior non-compliance. I said that sounded like retaliation. Catherine said it was enforcement. I asked the squad if they had any training or certification. The guy with the beard said they were volunteers. I asked if they had liability insurance. He did not answer. I asked Catherine if the HOA had liability insurance for volunteer inspectors. She said that was not my concern. I said it absolutely was my concern if someone slipped on my property during an unauthorized inspection. She said the inspection was authorized by the board. I asked her to show me the board resolution. She said it was in the meeting minutes. I said I had requested the meeting minutes under state law and had not received them yet. She said that was a separate issue. I said it was the same issue. The squad started looking uncomfortable. The woman with the bun said maybe they should come back later. Catherine snapped at her to stay on task. The guy with the beard asked Catherine if they were supposed to be writing citations or just documenting. Catherine said both. He asked her what the citation process was. She said he should know that already. He said he did not. Catherine's face went red. She told them both to wait in the car. They left. Catherine turned back to me. She said I was being deliberately obstructive, and it was going to cost me. I said I was asking basic questions, and if her squad could not answer them, That was not my problem. She said my car was still parked illegally and the tow vendor had been authorized. I said my car was in my assigned spot and had been there all night. She said the vendor would determine that. I asked her when the vendor was coming. She said that was not my concern. I said if a tow truck showed up without valid authorization, I would call the police. She said the police would side with the HOA. I said we would see. She turned and walked back to her car. The squad followed her. They drove off. I went back inside and checked the portal. There was a new entry, obstruction of compliance inspection. $50 fine. I took a screenshot. Paul called me that afternoon. He said Catherine had sent another email to the board asking for emergency enforcement powers during snow events. The email said I was actively undermining the association's authority and creating a hostile environment for volunteers. Paul said he had replied asking for specifics, and Catherine had accused him of protecting a problem homeowner. He said the other board members were staying quiet because Catherine scared them. I asked him if he thought she would actually try to tow my car. He said yes. He said Catherine had done it before to another homeowner and the management company had backed her up. He said the homeowner had eventually paid everything just to make it stop. I said I was not going to do that. He said he did not blame me. He said he would keep voting no on anything Catherine proposed, but he was only 1 vote out of 5. I thanked him. That night, I reviewed everything I had collected. Payment confirmations proving I was never delinquent. Screenshots of the edited portal entry. The lien request email with the bogus ledger. The tracking confirmation for my dispute packet. The rejection notice dated the same day the packet was delivered. The obstruction citation from this morning. And Paul's emails showing Catherine was pushing the board to escalate. It was a clear pattern of bad faith enforcement and retaliation. But I still did not have the one thing that would shut her down completely. I needed proof that the original violations were false. The edited portal entry was good, but not decisive. I needed something that would prove my car had been in the right spot, my snow removal had been timely, and my property had been compliant. I needed a third-party inspection report proving the property is compliant. I started making calls. I found a property compliance inspector who worked with HOA disputes. He said he could come out the next day and document the property conditions, including snow removal, ice management, parking compliance, and easement encroachment. He said his report would include time-stamped photos, measurements, and a signed certification. He said it would cost $300. I booked him. He showed up the next morning at 10 and spent an hour measuring, photographing, and taking notes. He checked my driveway, my snow piles, my assigned parking spot, the guest spots, the sidewalk, and the grass strip. He used a laser measure and a handheld GPS. When he was done, he said my property was fully compliant with every rule in the Timberline Winter Compliance Association governing documents. He said the snow pile was entirely on my property and did not encroach on any easement. He said my driveway had been cleared within the required time frame, and the remaining ice was minimal and typical for the weather conditions. He said my car had been in my assigned spot, and the guest spots were empty. He said he would have the report ready by end of business today. I paid him and he left. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The report arrived in my email at 4 p.m. It was 12 pages with photos, measurements, timestamps, and a notarized certification. It was perfect. I saved 3 copies and printed one. I folded the printed report and highlighted the key sections. Then I sent a copy to Paul and asked him to forward it to the board. He replied within 10 minutes saying he had sent it and copied the management company. He said Catherine was going to lose her mind. I said good. Catherine called me at 6 p.m. She said the inspection report was invalid because I had not requested permission from the board to conduct an independent inspection. I said I did not need permission to hire an inspector on my own property. She said third-party reports were not accepted as evidence under association rules. I asked her to show me that rule. She said it was implied in the governing documents. I said implied rules were not enforceable. She said I could take it up with the board. I said I planned to. She said the next board meeting was in 2 weeks. I said that was fine. She said my account was still in collections and the fees were still accumulating. I said we would see about that. She hung up. 2 days later, I got a letter from the management company saying my dispute packet had been received and was under review. It was dated 5 days ago. I checked the tracking. My original packet had been delivered 8 days ago. The management company had lost my dispute packet twice and acted like it was my fault. I called them and asked to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor said they had no record of my first packet and the second packet had just been logged. I said I had delivery confirmation for the first packet. She said their system showed no record. I said I would be filing a complaint with the state. She said that was my right. I asked her when I could expect a decision on the dispute. She said 4 to 6 weeks. I said that was unacceptable given that Catherine was threatening to tow my car and file a lien. She said enforcement actions were separate from dispute resolution. I said that was insane. She said it was policy. I hung up and immediately drafted a complaint to the Utah Department of Commerce. I included every piece of evidence I had collected and requested an investigation into the management company and the HOA board. I filed it online and got a confirmation number. The next snow emergency happened 3 days later, 6 inches overnight. I was out at 6 a.m. shoveling. Catherine drove by twice. The second time she stopped and rolled down her window. She said I was required to clear the entire sidewalk in front of my property within 12 hours. I said the rule said 24 hours. She said winter rules were different. I asked her to show me the winter rule amendment. She said it had been posted in the portal. I checked the portal on my phone. There was no winter rule amendment. I told her that. She said I must have missed it. I said I had downloaded every document in the portal and there was no winter amendment. She said she would email me a copy. I said I would wait. She drove off. The email never came. That night at 11:45 p.m., a tow truck pulled up in front of my house. It was a midnight tow attempt where Karen shines a bright flashlight at my camera and the driver refuses to hook without real authorization. I was still awake working on a project deadline. My Ring camera sent an alert. I pulled up the live feed and saw the truck idling and a driver getting out. Then I saw Catherine's car pull up behind the truck. She got out with a flashlight and walked up to my driveway. She shined the flashlight directly at my Ring camera. I opened the front door. I said the camera was recording, and if she touched my car, I was calling the police. She said the car was parked illegally, and the tow was authorized. I said the car was in my assigned spot and I had proof. She said her records showed otherwise. The tow truck driver walked over. He asked Catherine which car. She pointed at mine. He asked her for the authorization paperwork. She handed him a printed sheet. He looked at it under his flashlight. He asked her if the homeowner had been notified. She said notification was not required for emergency tows. He said his company required notification. He handed the paper back and said he was not hooking the car without proper documentation. Catherine said the documentation was proper. He said it was missing a signature and a case number. She said those were not required. He said they were required by his company policy. She started yelling at him. He got back in his truck and drove off. Catherine stood in my driveway for another minute shining her flashlight at the camera. Then she got in her car and left. I saved the camera footage and sent it to Paul. He replied immediately saying that was attempted theft and I should file a police report. I said I would in the morning. He said he was also going to forward the footage to the other board members and demand Catherine be removed from her position. I thanked him. I went to bed but did not sleep much. The next morning I filed a police report online. The officer who called me back said HOA towing disputes were civil matters and I should contact a lawyer. I said the tow truck driver had refused to take the car because the paperwork was invalid, which meant Catherine had lied to the driver and attempted an unauthorized tow. The officer said that was still a civil matter unless I could prove criminal intent. I said shining a flashlight at a security camera to blind it was obstruction. He said that was a stretch. I said I had video evidence. He said he would file the report, but I should not expect any action. I asked for the report number. He gave it to me. I added it to my evidence folder. Paul called me that afternoon. He said he had forwarded the tow truck footage to the board, and 3 of the 5 members had replied saying they were shocked and wanted an emergency meeting. He said Catherine had replied saying the tow was justified, and the driver had misunderstood the authorization. He said the management company had replied supporting Catherine. He said the emergency meeting was scheduled for tomorrow night at 7 p.m., and I was allowed to attend and speak. I said I would be there. He said to bring everything. I said I would. I spent that evening organizing my evidence. I printed copies of everything. Payment confirmations, screenshots of the edited portal entry, the lien request email, the tracking confirmation, the rejection notice, the obstruction citation, the inspector's report, the tow truck footage screenshots, the police report number. I put it all in a binder with tabs. I also printed a copy of the Utah HOA transparency law and highlighted the sections about records requests and good faith enforcement. I folded the inspector's report and put it in my jacket pocket as my trump card. I was ready. The meeting was held at a community center 2 blocks from my house. I walked over. The room was set up with a long table at the front for the board and rows of chairs for homeowners. About 20 people were there. Paul was at the board table. Catherine was sitting at the end with a stack of folders. The other 3 board members looked uncomfortable. The meeting started at 7:05. The board president, a man in his 60s named Ron, read the agenda. The emergency item was listed as discussion of enforcement procedures and homeowner dispute. Ron said I would have 5 minutes to present my side, and then Catherine would have 5 minutes to respond. I stood up and walked to the front. I opened my binder. I started with the payment confirmations. I said I had paid every fee on time and had proof. I showed the transaction IDs and timestamps. I said the management company had refused to acknowledge my payments and had instead claimed I was delinquent. I showed the rejection notice dated the same day my dispute packet was delivered. I said the packet had been lost twice. I showed the tracking confirmations. I said Catherine had edited a violation entry after I disputed it. I showed the screenshot with the last edited timestamp. Ron asked Catherine if that was true. Catherine said the edit was a correction to fix a clerical error. I said the edit changed the car description from a silver sedan to my dark blue hatchback, which meant the original violation was not even for my car. The room went silent. I continued. I said Catherine had sent a lien request to the board with a bogus ledger and mystery line items. I showed Paul's email thread. I said Catherine had conducted a compliance squad inspection with untrained volunteers who could not answer basic questions. I said she had attempted an unauthorized tow at midnight using invalid paperwork. I showed the tow truck footage screenshots. I said I had filed a police report. I gave the report number. Ron looked at Catherine. Catherine said I was mischaracterizing everything, and my behavior had been obstructive and hostile. I said I had asked basic questions and followed every procedure. I said I had requested records under state law, and the HOA had not responded. Ron asked the management company representative if that was true. The representative, a woman in a blazer, said they were working on the request. I said the law required a response within 10 business days, and it had been 3 weeks. She said they had been short-staffed. I said that was not an excuse for violating state law. Ron looked uncomfortable. He asked if I had anything else. I said I did. I pulled the folded inspector's report from my pocket. I said I had hired a third-party inspector to document my property, and the report proved I was fully compliant with every rule. I handed the report to Ron. He read the cover page. He passed it to the other board members. Catherine said third-party reports were not valid. I said there was no rule prohibiting them. Ron read the highlighted sections. He looked at Catherine. He asked her if she had any evidence that my property was actually non-compliant. Catherine opened one of her folders and pulled out a photo. She said the photo showed my snow pile encroaching on the easement. Ron looked at the photo. He looked at the inspector's report. He said the report included measurements showing the snow pile was entirely on my property. Catherine said the inspector was biased because I paid him. I said the report was notarized and included GPS coordinates. Ron asked the other board members if they had any questions. One of them, a woman named Lisa, asked Catherine how many other homeowners had been subjected to the same level of enforcement. Catherine said every homeowner was subject to the same rules. Lisa said that was not what she asked. She asked how many other homeowners had received 12 violations in 3 weeks. Catherine did not answer. Lisa said she wanted to see the full enforcement log for the neighborhood. Ron said that was a reasonable request. Catherine said the log was confidential. Ron said it was not. He asked the management company representative to produce the log. She said she would have to check with her supervisor. Ron said he wanted it by the end of the week. Paul spoke up. He said he had been on the board for 6 years and he had never seen enforcement actions this aggressive. He said Catherine had been pushing for lien approvals without proper documentation and had been pressuring the board to give her emergency powers. He said the tow truck incident was unacceptable and could have resulted in legal liability for the association. Ron asked Catherine to respond. Catherine said Paul was undermining the association's authority and creating a precedent that would encourage other homeowners to be non-compliant. Paul said that was absurd. He said homeowners had a right to dispute violations and request evidence. He said Catherine's interpretation of the rules was overly broad and punitive. Catherine said the rules do not care about your excuses and neither do I. The room went very quiet. Lisa said that attitude was the problem. She said Catherine's job was to enforce the rules fairly, not to punish people. Ron said he agreed. He said the board would be reviewing Catherine's enforcement actions and the management company's handling of dispute packets. He said my violations were being suspended pending a full review and my account would be credited for any fees paid. He said if the review found that the violations were invalid, the fees would be refunded and the records would be expunged. He said the meeting was adjourned. Catherine stood up and walked out without saying anything. The other board members stayed and talked to me. Lisa apologized for what I had been through. She said she had no idea Catherine had been operating this way. Ron said the board would be scheduling a special meeting to discuss Catherine's role and the management company's performance. I thanked them. Paul walked out with me. He said that went better than he expected. I said I was not celebrating yet. He said he understood. He said he would keep me updated. The next week was quiet. No new violations. No new notices. No more visits from Catherine. I checked the portal every day. My account still showed the suspended violations, but no new activity. I got an email from the management company saying they were conducting an internal review and would respond to my records request within 10 business days. I replied saying the deadline had already passed and I expected full compliance. They did not reply. Paul called me the following Monday. He said the board had held a special meeting over the weekend. He said Catherine had been asked to provide documentation for every violation she had issued in the past 3 months. He said she had produced a binder with photos and notes, but many of the entries were incomplete or inconsistent. He said the board had also reviewed the enforcement log and found that I had received more violations than the rest of the neighborhood combined. He said the log showed that several violations had been issued for things that were not actually against the rules. He said the board had voted to suspend Catherine from her enforcement duties pending a full investigation. He said the management company had objected, but the board had overruled them. He said the management company was now claiming they had found my original dispute packet and it was being processed. I said that was convenient. He laughed. He said the board was also reviewing the management company's contract and considering whether to switch providers. He said I was not the only homeowner who had complained about lost paperwork and unresponsive staff. I said that did not surprise me. 2 days later, I got an email from the management company with my records request attached. It included 6 months of board meeting minutes, all violation records, and all correspondence between the board and the management company. I spent the evening reading through it. The minutes showed that Catherine had been pushing for stricter enforcement since she joined the board 18 months ago. The correspondence showed that the management company had been encouraging her because higher enforcement meant higher fee revenue, and they took a percentage. There were emails where Catherine asked the management company to delay processing dispute packets so that late fees would accumulate. There were emails where the management company suggested targeting specific homeowners who had complained about other issues. My name appeared in 4 separate email threads. In one thread, Catherine said I was a problem homeowner who needed to be made an example. In another thread, the management company suggested using winter enforcement as leverage to force me into compliance on unrelated issues. It was all there in writing. I saved everything and sent copies to Paul and to the lawyer I had consulted earlier. The lawyer called me the next morning. He said the emails were devastating, and I had a strong case for harassment, bad faith enforcement, and possibly fraud. He said I could sue both the HOA and the management company. He said I could also file additional complaints with the state and request an audit of the HOA's financial records. He said if the state found that the management company had been manipulating fee revenue, there could be criminal charges. He said his retainer was still $1,500, but he thought we could settle quickly and recover my costs. I said I wanted to move forward. He said he would draft a demand letter and send it to the HOA and the management company by the end of the week. Paul called me 2 days later. He said the board had received a letter from my lawyer and had immediately called an emergency meeting. He said Ron had opened the meeting by reading the emails I had provided. He said the room had been silent. He said Lisa had moved to terminate the management company's contract immediately. He said the motion had passed 4-1. Catherine had been the only no vote. He said Ron had then moved to remove Catherine from the board for misconduct. He said the motion had passed 3-2. Catherine and one other member had voted no. He said Catherine had walked out. He said the board had also voted to refund all fees I had paid and to send me a formal apology letter. He said they were in the process of hiring a new management company and reviewing all enforcement actions from the past year. He said several other homeowners had come forward with similar complaints about Catherine and the old management company. He said it was turning into a much bigger thing. I said good. The apology letter arrived 3 days later. It was signed by Ron and Lisa. It said the board had completed its review and found that all violations issued to me had been invalid. It said my account had been credited and a refund check was being mailed. It said the board was implementing new oversight procedures to prevent similar issues in the future. It said Catherine was no longer involved in enforcement and had been issued a written warning for harassment behavior. It said the management company had been terminated, and the board was working with the state to ensure compliance with all transparency and governance requirements. The letter ended with an invitation to attend the next board meeting to discuss any remaining concerns. I filed the letter with my other evidence. The refund check arrived a week later. It was for $375, which included all the fees I had paid plus interest. I deposited it. I also got a call from the new management company introducing themselves and asking if I had any outstanding issues. I said I did not. They said they were reviewing all homeowner accounts and would be reaching out to resolve any discrepancies. I thanked them and hung up. The lawyer called me a few days later. He said the HOA had agreed to settle. He said they would pay my legal fees, issue a formal apology, and agree to a consent decree that prohibited targeted enforcement and required third-party oversight of all violation decisions. He said the old management company had also agreed to pay a settlement to avoid a lawsuit. He said the total payout was $4,500. He said after his fees, I would net about $3,000. I said that was fine. He said the consent decree was the real win because it would protect me and other homeowners going forward. I agreed. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. Paul called me a month after the emergency meeting. He said the board had just held its first meeting under the new procedures. He said attendance had tripled because homeowners wanted to see the changes. He said Ron had opened the meeting by summarizing the investigation and the settlements. He said several homeowners had stood up and shared their own stories about Catherine and the old management company. He said one homeowner had brought a stack of complaints that had been ignored for months. It was the funny karma moment near the payoff where Karen gets hoisted by her own rules. Karen says nobody complains, and a stack of complaints appears. Catherine had claimed during the investigation that no other homeowners had ever complained about her enforcement, and the board had initially taken her at her word. But when Ron asked the room if anyone had complaints, a dozen hands went up. The homeowner with the stack walked to the front and dropped the papers on the table. She said she had filed written complaints with the old management company every month for 6 months, and had been told each time that her complaints were unfounded. Ron had read through the stack. Every complaint was about Catherine. Every complaint described the same pattern: aggressive enforcement, refusal to accept evidence, threats of liens and towing, and manipulation of fees. Ron had looked at the board and said this should have been escalated months ago. The management company should have flagged it. The board should have known. He said the failure was systemic and the board took responsibility. He said the new procedures would include quarterly reporting on enforcement actions, mandatory documentation review, and a homeowner complaint hotline that went directly to the board instead of through the management company. He said the board was committed to rebuilding trust. The room had applauded. Paul said Catherine had tried to attend the meeting but had been told her board access had been revoked. She had argued that the vote to remove her was invalid because it had not been properly noticed. Ron had produced the meeting notice and the certified mail receipt showing it had been delivered to her address. She had left. Paul said he had not seen her in the neighborhood since. He said her house was for sale. I said I was not surprised. He said the neighborhood felt different now, calmer. He said people were not afraid of the HOA anymore. I said that was a good thing. The state investigation concluded 2 months later. The Department of Commerce issued a report finding that the old management company had violated multiple provisions of Utah HOA law, including failure to process dispute packets in a timely manner, improper fee assessments, and lack of transparency in financial reporting. The report also found that Catherine had exceeded her authority as an enforcement coordinator and had engaged in a pattern of harassment and retaliation against homeowners who challenged her decisions. The department imposed a $10,000 fine on the old management company and required them to implement new training and oversight procedures. The report recommended that the HOA review its governing documents to clarify enforcement procedures and limit the authority of individual board members. The Timberline Winter Compliance Association board adopted those recommendations at the next meeting. Ron sent me a copy of the updated rules and thanked me for pushing the issue. He said the neighborhood was better off because I had not backed down. I appreciated that. Catherine never apologized. She sold her house and moved out of the neighborhood 3 months after the settlement. I heard through Paul that she had taken a job with another HOA in a different city. I felt bad for those homeowners. But that was not my problem anymore. The payoff came during a public meeting moment where the minutes turn against Karen. It happened at the first annual meeting under the new procedures. The board was required to present a full accounting of the previous year's enforcement actions. Ron read through the summary. Out of 73 violations issued during Catherine's tenure, 41 had been disputed. Of those 41, 38 had been overturned or withdrawn after review. The 3 that remained were minor parking violations that the homeowners had not contested. Ron said the numbers spoke for themselves. He said Catherine's enforcement had been statistically invalid and had cost the association thousands of dollars in legal fees, settlements, and management company penalties. He said the board had failed to catch it early, and he took personal responsibility for that. He said the new procedures were designed to ensure it never happened again. The minutes reflected that the board had voted unanimously to adopt a resolution condemning Catherine's conduct and committing to fair and transparent enforcement going forward. The resolution was entered into the permanent record. The HOA consequence was clear. The management company disciplines the rep who enabled it. The old management company had been forced to terminate the regional manager who had been Catherine's primary contact and who had encouraged the aggressive enforcement strategy. The company also implemented new training requirements for all staff and established an independent review process for homeowner disputes. They sent a letter to every HOA they managed explaining the changes and apologizing for the failures. It did not fix what they had done, but it was something. The Karen consequence was also clear. Karen gets a written warning for harassment behavior. The board had issued the warning as part of the removal process, and it became part of the official record. If Catherine ever tried to serve on another HOA board in Utah, the warning would show up in any background check. It was not as satisfying as a lawsuit, but it was a permanent mark. Winter ended. Spring came. The snow melted. The neighborhood started to feel normal again. I kept my evidence folder just in case, but I did not need it. The new management company was responsive and professional. The board meetings were calm and productive. I even started to enjoy living there. Paul and I stayed in touch. He said the board elections were coming up, and several new candidates were running on transparency and accountability platforms. He said he was optimistic. I said I was too. He said he appreciated what I had done. I said I appreciated his support. He said that was what neighbors were for. I never saw Catherine again. But every time I got a red-stamped final notice envelope in the mail, even if it was just junk mail, I felt a little spike of anger. That signature detail stayed with me. It was a reminder that HOA disputes are not just about rules and fees. They are about power and control and the people who abuse both. Catherine had tried to bury me in violations and fees because she could, because the system let her, because nobody had pushed back before. I pushed back, and the system changed. I still live in that neighborhood. I still follow the rules. I still shovel my driveway and clear the ice and park in my assigned spot. But I also keep my evidence folder. I keep my camera running. I keep my receipts. And if another Catherine ever shows up, I will be ready. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.